In the summer of 336 BC, Greece stood still. King Philip II of Macedon, the most powerful ruler the Greek world had ever known, was assassinated in public. He was killed not on the battlefield, but during a celebration, a wedding meant to display unity, strength, and the future of his dynasty. Philip left behind no peaceful inheritance. Instead, he left a Greece united by force, a revolutionary army unlike anything before it, and a war already planned, a full invasion of the Persian Empire. But Philip would not lead it. That responsibility fell to his son. Alexander was only 20 years old. To his enemies, this was an opportunity. To his allies, a moment of uncertainty. To Persia, it looked like the collapse of a fragile experiment. They expected the Macedonian Empire to fall apart. What followed would prove them catastrophically wrong. Alexander did not inherit a throne secure by tradition. Macedon was a kingdom held together by loyalty to Philip, not by love for his son. Within days of Philip's death, rival nobles questioned Alexander's legitimacy, Greek city-states whispered rebellion, northern tribes prepared to test Macedonian borders. To the south, Athens debated whether this was their chance to regain freedom. To the east, Persia watched silently, confident that youth and ambition would destroy Alexander from within. Alexander understood something immediately. If he hesitated, he would not rule for long. His response was swift and ruthless. Potential rivals were executed. Power was centralized. The army was secured. There would be no regency, no compromise, no sign of weakness. Alexander was king. Securing Macedon was only the first step. Greece itself was unstable. Philip had forced the city-states into the League of Corinth, uniting them under Macedonian leadership for war against Persia. But that unity existed only as long as Macedon looked strong. In 335 BC, Thebes rebelled. It was a bold move, and a fatal one. Thebes believed Alexander was too young, too inexperienced, and too distracted to respond decisively. They expected negotiation. What they received was annihilation. Alexander marched south with terrifying speed. The city was surrounded, stormed, and destroyed. Thebes was razed to the ground. Its population was killed or enslaved. Only temples and the house of a poet were spared. This was not cruelty for its own sake. It was strategy. Alexander was sending a message not just to Greece, but to the world. Rebellion will be answered with extinction. Athens watched in silence. No Greek city rebelled again. With Greece secured, Alexander turned east. The invasion of Persia was not his invention. It was Philip's plan. Philip had spent years transforming Macedon's military. The Sarissa phalanx, wielding 6-meter pikes, elite heavy cavalry trained to strike decisive blows, integrated command between infantry, cavalry, and skirmishers. This was not the traditional Greek hoplite army. It was a combined arms war machine. Persia, for all its size, had never faced anything like it. In 334 BC, Alexander gathered roughly 40,000 men and marched toward Asia. It was a gamble of historic proportions. He was leading a relatively small army into the largest empire on earth, one that stretched from Egypt to India. There would be no retreat. Before crossing into Asia, Alexander stopped at Troy. To modern audiences, this moment seems strange. Troy belongs to myth. Achilles is a literary hero. But to Alexander, and to Greeks of his time, Achilles was real, not in the modern historical sense, but in a cultural and religious one. The ancient Greeks did not separate myth, history, and identity the way we do. Heroes of Homer's age were believed to have lived in a distant, greater past. Alexander had been raised on this worldview. His tutor, Aristotle, gave him a personal copy of the Iliad, not as literature but as a guide to life. Achilles represented eternal glory, personal honor, a life remembered forever, even if cut short. At Troy, Alexander honored Achilles' tomb. He ran ritual laps around it. He offered sacrifices. This was not theater. Alexander believed he was walking in the footsteps of a hero, and that his own life would be measured against that standard. He did not seek safety. He sought remembrance. Alexander crossed the Hellespont. the narrow strait separating Europe from Asia. Centuries earlier, Persian kings had crossed the same waters to invade Greece. Now, a Greek king crossed in the opposite direction. Legend says Alexander threw a spear into Asian soil and claimed the land won by the spear. Whether symbolic or literal, the message was clear. This was conquest, not diplomacy. Persian officials remained calm. They believed the invasion would end quickly. They gathered their forces near a river called the Granicus. Their strategy was simple: kill Alexander, end the war in a single afternoon. The Battle of the Granicus was not a careful engagement. It was chaos. Against the advice of his generals, Alexander attacked immediately, crossing a river under enemy fire. Persian cavalry waited on the opposite bank. Greek mercenaries stood behind them. Alexander led the charge personally. He was not observing from the rear. He was at the point of impact. During the fighting, Alexander was struck down. A Persian noble raised an axe to deliver the killing blow. At the last moment, a Macedonian officer intervened, killing the attacker and saving Alexander's life. The battle turned. The phalanx advanced. Cavalry broke Persian lines. Greek mercenaries fighting for Persia were slaughtered or captured. It was a decisive Macedonian victory, but more importantly, it shattered an illusion. Alexander was not reckless luck. He was lethal. After Granicus, the Persian western defenses collapsed with alarming speed. Cities opened their gates. Satraps fled. Persian authority in Asia Minor disintegrated. Alexander moved relentlessly. He did not pause to consolidate. He pressed forward, knowing momentum was his greatest weapon. To the Persian court, this was no longer a border skirmish. It was an invasion with consequences. For the first time, King Darius III began to take Alexander seriously. The great king would not rely on satraps again. He would lead his own army. By 332 BC, Alexander had achieved the impossible. He had secured a fragile throne, subdued Greece through fear and speed, crossed into Asia, defeated Persia's generals, and proven that his invasion was no reckless adventure. But the war had not yet reached its true beginning, because ahead of Alexander stood not governors or mercenaries, but the full power of the Persian Empire led by its king. And the next time they met, the world would change forever. Thanks for watching this episode. Subscribe for more carefully researched accounts from history's vast timeline.